Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. It's a pleasure to have you all joining so many and for sure from so many places. This webinar is organized by Thematic Working Group on Rural Youth Employment of the Global Donor Platform on Rural Development. And my name is Elisenda Puertas. I'm a rural economy specialist at the ILO in HQ Geneva. And I'm one of the co-chairs of this thematic working group together with my colleague, Ji-Young Rim, who is a senior policy analyst at the OECD Development Center. Just a little introduction. So just to keep in mind who are our population. So there are more than 1 billion young people in the world today, and 90% or around 90% live in developing countries, and over half are living and working in rural areas. So creating decent jobs for youth is a priority in many developing countries, and in particular in Sub-Saharan Africa. Growing population, urbanization, and a rising middle class in many African countries are increasing demand for more diverse and higher value-added agriculture and food products. So local agri-food systems that would go from production to processing to food-related services provide opportunities for business to flourish. And youth, both in rural and urban areas, can be key actors to shape the future of agri-food systems. But to enable this, supporting the development of micro and small businesses is critical, both to promote agripreneurs, but also to generate opportunities for wage job creation in the agri-food value chains. So this webinar wanted to bring the evidence with some key elements from successful agri-food projects that have helped agribusiness development, job creation, both in rural, peri-urban, but also urban youth. So let me introduce our moderator of today, Jenna Tesdal, who is the director of WIPERT, a Young Professionals for Agricultural Development, which is an organization that promotes the empowerment of young leaders to shape and transform agri-food systems. Jenna, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot and welcome to everybody again.
Thank you so much, and welcome on my behalf as well. We're really excited to have you here today because, of course, as the director of YPART, a Young Professionals Network, we know that jobs is a really challenging topic for young people, but we know it's not just about the quantity of jobs as well. We know that it is really about quality jobs as well, and jobs that really speak to the qualifications of young people. So not underemployment, but employment that really meets our capacities. So today, this webinar is going to showcase experiences from a range of projects that aim at promoting more, but also better jobs for youth in the broader agri-food systems. We're going to talk about lessons learned and proven tools to support agripreneurs and micro and small enterprises, but also in their downstream activities like processing and trading of the agri-food sector. The panel will also discuss the roles of different stakeholders in ensuring a youth-inclusive food systems transformation. This will be an interactive session, so also get your questions ready for later on as well, because over the next hour and a half, we're going to learn from global projects from Tech Dev, and then from the GIZ project Rural Employment with a focus on youth. And then we'll move to a panel discussion to discuss the practical implications, not only of these projects, but also others, and of rural youth employment as a whole. So get ready for your chance to interact also with the speakers. First up, we have our lessons learned from global projects. We have two speakers with us here today. So we have Jean-Marc, who is the Vice President of Tech Dev, and we also have Sven Braulik from GIZ, who is going to tell us about achievements and lessons learned from the global project Rural Youth Employment, or Rural Employment with a focus on youth. So first up, we have Mr. Jean-Marc, who is going to tell us about supporting the development of agribusiness microenterprises in West Africa and lessons learned from the Hub IIT project. You have 15 minutes, Mr. Jean-Marc, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jenna. We'll try first to share my screen. Here it is. And okay. You can see,
Perfect.
everybody can see?
Yes, we see your screen well. Thank you.
Okay. Let me just do one more thing. anyway. So first of all, I'm Jean-Marc Delors. I'm a food science and technology graduated, and I did also some management graduation. I've been working in the food industry for 40 years, and in many continents, and in developing and developed countries, and with many different products, but always in the transformation of agricultural products. So now, in my presentation, I want to share with you what we've done with our NGO, which is called TechDev. TechDev stands for Technology for Development. And we are an NGO which was created in about 30 years ago by technical people, and we are based in Paris. As of today, we have 3 full-time employees, and then it's a network of volunteers, about 20 to 30 different, covering different types of technology. And these people have expertise in transformation, and most of the time they have experience also in Africa, which explain why our focus of expertise right now is in Africa. The objective is really to create added value for very small enterprises and to help them becoming medium-sized and trying to get more professional in the product that they do process. And it did expand then from technology into more employment questions and also environment. So it's really giving the full picture. And it's what we call companionship. You know, I know it's not probably not the correct name in English, but it's compagnonnage in French. You know, which means that really we provide support for the very small enterprises to get into structured markets. The activity that we had in the last 10 years, to give you a focus more, in 2015, we started a project in Mali, and we have been financed by AFD, the French Agency for Development. And we did also an evaluation of in the country of Senegal. This worked very well, and it did. The AFD suggested that we could expand, you know, into Sahel in different countries, which means that from 2019 to 24, this year actually, we were covering Mali, Burkina, Chad, and Senegal. Unfortunately, at the end of last year, Burkina Faso, Mali, we had many political problems, and geopolitics, you know, meant that we had to stop the financing in these 2 countries. So we are now focusing really on Chad and Senegal, but we are currently evaluating new countries like Benin and Ivory Coast with potential new fundings. So what we have done during this last 5 years, from 18 to 24, in this big project, is we implemented what we call 8 Hub EET, and I will come back to what it is, Hub EET, in the 4 different countries, and we covered by this mean, you know, around 1,000 very small enterprises, which were really follow. And when we say, you know, it could cover from 1 to 50 employees, basically. That gives you just a screen, you know, a map of where we have been implemented this ABET. What we have to say is, like, in each case, we do a partnership with some local institute. Usually it's like a technical Agrifood technology center, you know, which provides support and provides also the setup, you know, for the local organization. So you have the different years of experience that we have in these different countries. Now, if I come to one example of the, let me just, sorry. So one example is what we are doing currently with in Senegal, which is the local organization that we call Gindi. So it's basically, it's all local employees, local technologists. We have a team of 4 food technologists currently, and they do visit the enterprise, evaluate enterprises, small enterprises that they feel there is, and we have an evaluation grid, you know, to really evaluate the enterprise and see if there is a need for support. And they do visit them regularly, establishing a relationship with them. They are in partnership with a local institute, ITA in Dakar, for example, Institute of Technologie Alimentaire. And they also collaborate with universities. In Dakar, it's ESP, École Supérieure Polytechnique, which, and I will come back to that because we have a good relationships, which helps also to the employment of young engineers or young technologists. Then their expertise is really started with technology at first, you know, for the food processing. So it's basically most of the time, you know, enterprises wanted to grow, so they need equipment. They need also innovation on the recipes, and they need also support to ensure the product and quality safety. Then very soon comes problems with financing. So they do also support them into trying to evaluate the financing needs and trying to find solutions. Another space which is really difficult for the small enterprises is really the access to the market. So it's the AMM is autorisation de mise sur le marché, also all the processing and registration of products, you know, to be sold on the structured market. They also provide support now. We see more and more of these distribution companies, you know, European ones, setting up in Africa, and they do apply the same commercial questions, you know, that they do in Europe. So our small company, you know, they need to be also trained to understand really the problems. And then also what we have been developing very soon is what we call circular economy, because between all the different enterprises, they help each other. It could be by sharing some raw materials or buying, you know, packaging, for example, at a level that will get a good price. So all this, you know, the team is trained really to support the enterprises in all these different aspects. Now, if I can get to my next screen. Why? Sorry. Now my mouse doesn't work anymore. Okay, I don't know why. Okay, there you go. This just 2 examples, you know, for 2 small companies in the region of Dakar. One is making fruit-based juices and jams. So usually this lady came to us, you know, with question about equipment to process and also to pasteurize, for example, and with the support of our technologists, she was able to reinvest in some packaging and processing equipment and reach now, deliveries to hotel, to small and to supermarkets in the region of Dakar. So in 3 years, she went from really was almost 2 employees, now to 10 and even 15 right now, and she had a high growth of sales. The other one is making biscuits mainly, and something he started from a very small operation, but in 4 years, he had grown to about 22 employees and really grow his sales. Now, if we look at the employment facts, so all these micro are mainly managed by women. So you see in the about 1,000 enterprises we have been in contact with, 80% more or less is managed by women. And of all the employees that we train on site, same thing. I mean, about 80% is women. However, what we've seen also that we have been training from this institute or universities or school that I mentioned before. We have been training these some technicians, young technicians, into the hub with us, or place them into internships in the enterprises, and some of them have been integrated into these enterprises, or even some of them started their own business. So now, if we go quickly into lessons learned for us, for the entrepreneurs at the entrepreneurs level, what we see is, is that there's really no local programs, for all the governments. They go for the medium enterprises or the big enterprises, but mainly for these very micro enterprises, there is no structure to help them. So they don't have the support for technical or for administrative. Financing is difficult also because there is a mini initiative of financing, in Africa right now. But when it comes to the size which is adapted to these small enterprises, there is no really solutions. So we need to. It's between micro and medium size financing, if you want, but they need some support there. Then difficulty is also to get to integrate the structural market, and you have international distributors now, and they are quite aggressive also, even with small enterprises. So we need to defend them, and they need to get structured to be able to defend themselves. However, what we see, that they are very open to modern technology. So of course we use all kinds of digital technology in terms of communication, in terms of sharing experience between the different ones, and they are very open also to new initiative and innovations. In terms at the level of the hub, what we see is that auto financing, which is the enterprises, they do have an annual fee, to get the support, but this is not big, and it doesn't cover the whole cost of the operations. So we know that we could cover more or less 20% of the cost, being by doing analysis or doing these annual fees, which is more or less, also what we see in France, for example, where you have the regional structure, it's about the same thing. They get about 25% auto financing, and then they need some funding from government or state or whatever. The hubs are, so to complement this 20%, we need financing. being from a private foundation, being from government programs or international foundation also. However, what we see also is that the young graduates, are very attracted by the social aspect of this initiative and supporting the development of their own small enterprises in their country, and they are very, very attracted by helping this kind of initiative. And then same thing for the university and technology are also very interested because it does give them, some potential employment for their graduates, but it also gives them the real needs, of countries. So a real case studied for technology or for some economical case. And for us, for the NGO tech dev, the problem is to get budget, of course. We also have a technical database that we share with everybody, which is also quite extensive and it needs a lot of support to get this. To know also new financing. And what we are doing and discussing right now is also a complement to other NGOs which are also working. Finally, just for the conclusion, I want to say that we think it's a good initiative, and we have seen the value of setting up this through the experience that we had in the last 10 years. We see that the development of this microstructure creates employment, for youngs, from men and female, and contribute also to the development of the food security in the country, which is very positive. And then the other point, and the picture here relates to this because it does create also South-South communication. That means that today, between the different countries, even today with Mali and Burkina, where we had to stop the financing, but they're still discussing between themselves. So we have a WhatsApp group, we have web-based solutions, that allow this communication between the different countries. So I think this is very interesting. So this, in short, will be my conclusion. I hope I'm in time. And this is my information. If you need additional info or contacts, you have all my information on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your detailed presentation. I definitely took away that there's a need for technical support for these small enterprises, in addition to that finance, which is also missing for them in often cases, and that you all are working to fill that gap. But what I also saw is that you're really being able to connect the dots between many players, right? So being able to connect the dots between a company that works with the pulp, for example, in this juice example that you gave. So I think that networking aspect as well is something that is essential, and showing that small enterprises can really benefit from a lot by some of those measures. So thank you so much for your presentation. And I'm really looking forward to what we hear from the next presentation as well from Sven. Sorry, please excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. And Sven is going to tell us about this GITID project, that's rural employment with a focus on youth. And there's some really great tools that have resulted out of this project. And I'm sure you'll see some connections to the last presentation as well. So the floor is yours for the next 15 minutes, Sven. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jenna, and a very warm welcome to everyone. Yeah, as Jenna already said, with my presentation, it's about the global project on employment in rural areas with a focus on youth. That's what I've been working for with GIZ, based in Germany for the last 6 years now. And we're actually coming to an end of the project. And therefore, I would like to introduce to you today some basics of the project, the approach, what we achieved, looking a bit on what we did on business development startup support with business models, and then some lessons and further resources. So the project, it started back in 2018, coming to an end, as I said, and had a budget of roughly 40 million euros, including around 4 million by the Norwegian embassy in Malawi. The project had has still two main components. One advisory component in Germany, where we work closely with the BMZ, but also with other international organizations and other donors. What's more in the focus for today is the operational component, with activities in Kenya, Burkina Faso, Malawi, and Mozambique. And this is what a global project in GIZ is all about. It doesn't need to be global. We have 4 African countries, but main characteristic is that it uses a common conceptual framework, in our case, an integrated approach to employment promotion for young people. We had a focus on meso and micro level, so not getting involved on national level and policy making. And of course, there's the opportunity in such a project for some south exchange and learning. And of course, we have a common data system for the M&E. But let's look at what it actually means, this common conceptual framework. What did we work with, or come up with, better to say. This is the 360-degree agri-jobs approach, how we call it now. It's taking a round view on everything that needs to be considered, and starting here with the part on business development. It's about business models, startup and founders support, a lot of cooperation with private partners, and also access to finance. Then we have qualification and training. That's more the technical skills that are necessary, but also soft skills and mindset development. Now, there's a matching part, where it's about the access to job opportunities, including via career guidance, job fairs, and internships. But very often in rural areas, it's also linking with business opportunities. One box still missing, networking, and that's where it's all about youth and youth organizations, the local ecosystem, and the cooperation within that ecosystem, but also advocacy and networking. Now, I said, we call this now this 360-degree agri-jobs approach, and it's actually coming from what has been around in German development cooperation for quite some time now, called integrated approach for job creation, and this was adapted. This is what it looked like before. We have a house with 3 pillars, and you can also already recognize that we have this demand of labor, supply of labor, the matching between framework conditions on the national level on top there, and the new thing here, these foundations, the local ecosystem in rural areas. And for us, it all starts with this development of youth-centered business models, valid for both demand and supply side for labor. If we look closer, what stands behind this approach and what we did, you can see this always in the not bold, in which countries we implemented which tool. You have this support on the demand side for labor, startup promotion, MSME trainings, coaching, partnerships with the private sector. Look at the other side, the supply side of labor. There we have these these technical short courses, Also sometimes including entrepreneurial skills, because very often it's not clear if you're a bigger company taking on people, or if you're a self-employed micro enterprise. Personal initiative trainings are quite important. We had that in Malawi and Mozambique, and then we had something specific for women, and that's called Gender Makes Business Sense. Now you see in the middle the matching platforms, career orientation. We did job fairs, but also opportunity fairs, as I said before, because very often it's not about matching to a job, but this networking and matching to market opportunities. Internship programs were also implemented in all countries. Now in the foundation, we have these youth networks, as in the title of that one tool we developed, and directly jumping to the top, the framework conditions. Of course, even though we were not active on the national level, we did make connections and went even further, at least in a cooperation with the African Union, jointly supported with the development of an African agribusiness youth strategy. So you see many blue boxes now, giving you an impression on what we did in mostly all countries, and there's more. So there are actually over 70 tools now that we compiled and put together in a toolbox for rural youth employment. Not all are GIZ. We also picked some from other organizations, and there's a link here, and maybe also in a second in the chat, where you can have a look. Moving on, what did we actually achieve? We wanted to reach 36,000 youth. We have way overachieved this. Almost 50,000 youth we could reach in these 4 countries. And with the increased income, we're around 100%, let's say. We achieved what we wanted, 17,000 youth with increased income, better income. We're very happy that we could create more jobs that we anticipated in the beginning. 17,000, 145% overachieved this indicator, and we're still counting. We have a M&D system that is actually you can also access and see how these figures develop. Again, there's a link up here. You get the presentation later, and it should also come in the chat in a second. What else? Yeah, we have this focus on youth, and this focus means that 81% of all beneficiaries we work with are in this age bracket 15 to 35 that defines youth. More than 50% were women, and out of the almost 50,000, we're back to that number from the slide before, 76% have stated that they have improved employment prospects. Of course, we did not ask all of them, but these figures come from a recent evaluation of the now ending project. I put one more slide from this evaluation, and this is at looking at MSME and startup support, where you can see that almost 2,000, we worked with almost 2,500 MSME and startups. On average, 2 jobs were created by these small companies. Again, 81% with improved employment prospects and improved business. Interestingly, also, these MSMEs were the most satisfied. They benefited especially from pitch nights, events that we organized where they can build their business networks. But of course, we also need to see that formalization, access to finance, there's still things need to be done in the future. Now, this closer look at business development and startup support. I mentioned before that in the countries, everything started in this regard of support with business models. And why is that? Because we think that it's really important to have a business model that states that what we were supporting is profitable and sustainable. And if you think of the support for a business model, then you also see what skills are needed, what support is needed, what trainings are necessary to achieve or to implement this business model. Looking at the participants, for them it's important to create a vision, to know where they're heading. And business models, you can play with them. You can see how they work on different scales, or if they work on different scales. And for this, the economic modeling helped a lot. Now, what is a good or ideal youth business model? There were criteria that we looked at, and this is low investment costs, limited or not much working capital that is necessary, should create quick returns, and it's always good to have some technology involved, to make it interesting for youth. Should be scalable and labor intensive, so that jobs are actually created. And it's always good if there's a missing link in the value chain where this business model comes in. Just one example for such a business model. I think most of us will have had something to do with the chicken or poultry value chain. In this case, poultry meat production, and you see the ticks to all the criteria that I just mentioned before. Not much land needed. You can build a basic shed. Turnover is quite quick. Is scalable. You can start small and end up with thousands of chicken in the end. If the business model is right, it's profitable. Some not digital things, but at least technical things involved with these feeders and the position in the value chain. It creates demands up and downstream in the value chain. Now, I did not bring an example or two of concrete examples of people we work with, but we did develop these persona, not an actual person, but it's good and helped also us to understand who are actually these youth, what are their different backgrounds, and also then see what of the tools and activities are actually necessary to support them. And here we have one example, young male, university degree, living closer to an urban center, and here it worked, or what we could offer is this business mentoring and coaching. I think many have the idea to have sustainable business models. So it's going into the agri-ecological direction, let's say. And again here, the networking and pitch nights, getting connected to possibilities for financing. That is what for such a person played a major role. The second example is a young woman, not that well educated, followed a husband, still living in a rural area, and here the gender makes business sense. This tool approach that is gender specific came in, and also building the entrepreneurial mindset, financial literacy on a more basic level. I think we had quite some young women that had this kind of background. Now, lessons. Actually, the approach, it is flexible, can be applied in very different contexts and makes these connections. I just mentioned agroecology, so green jobs, digital things, but also gender transformative approaches like with this gender mixed business sense. Need to be flexible with the selection of value chains and the business models. And if it's about self-employment, I mentioned earlier, then it's not about matching between a small company and that is taking on jobs, but it's about these networks and market opportunities.
And if I could just ask you to quickly wrap up, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, will do, Jenna. It's just here. Of course, with all these activities, it's very important to work in the ecosystem with all the different actors and youth groups, and support actually youth to get organized and become such an actor. And one lesson for us, especially, I mean, we did this over a couple of years now, but the question still stands: who can continue this kind of work, especially we are coordinating with all these actors. Now, there are two more slides to come with 2 sentences. One here is the link to our website, also in the chat. You find all these tools or the description of the approach there, with a lot of actual portraits and success stories of real people as well. And second and last slide here, you also find a lot of our knowledge products. I think it must be 60 knowledge products around that, all on the website, and you see all the topics that are covered. So it's really worthwhile to visit this site and to get a even better understanding of what we did and what you could do. And that's from me now. The project will close by the end of the year. We all stay with GIZ, so our email addresses will be valid in the future as well, for you to come back with questions, or if you want to discuss how to further support young people in rural areas. Over. Back to you, Jenna.
Thank you so much for sharing what you've been able to accomplish with that project. I think from our side, it's really inspiring because you've been able to show so many connections, so many knowledge products that people continue to use into the future. So from my perspective, at least from YPART, I can see how we can use a lot of those tools and knowledge products, but how they could also be potentially built into future projects, right? That maybe aren't specifically focusing on rural youth, but are focusing on climate change, mitigation and adaptation, but want to have positive impacts on youth and rural youth. So thank you so much for sharing. And I think that makes a really great bridge into our next portion of this webinar, which is a discussion on the policy implications, We see that these projects have been able to make a really great difference in their communities where they're working, but we want to turn these into long-term impacts. And those were both two of the things that our panelists from before were speaking about. How do we turn this into long-term change? And so this is what we want to look at with this panel. We want to take these experiences and make it a systemic approach. And so we have three discussants: Ms. Neil, who is the Managing Director of Native Feeds in Botswana. We have Mr. Hans, who is from Aseli, Africa, and also Markham Systems Finance Officer at the USAID Center for Ag-Led Growth in the Environment and Food Security Bureau there at USAID. And we have Ms. Dr. Pilar, who is Nutrition and Food Systems Officer at FAO. I want to first just direct my questions to Ms. Neo, who is, of course, working in Botswana. And we'd love for you to just tell us about your business. How many people do you work with, and how long have you been in business? And then what has been the biggest challenge in sustaining and growing your business? And connecting to the theme of the panel, in terms of policies, what do you wish you could change or be provided more to support agripreneurs like you? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. My name is Sata. I'm from Native Feeds. For me, it's been 8 years now. I think we're celebrating 8 years in the business. Currently, we have, I think, two temporary animal scientists. We've hired animal scientists who work in farm management services. We also have a nutritionist that helps us, not on a full-time basis, but on a part-time basis in terms of formulations and quality control issues for the products that we produce, because we produce livestock feed. With the branding and design, we've had this guy who started with us from the beginning of the business. So actually, we have 4 people in the business. In terms of the challenges of keeping the business, I think the major challenge when I started this business, I was looking at an innovative approach, finding solutions that are easy for farmers, trying, even exploring the use of indigenous plants, raw material that is left out or waste, taken as waste, and trying to process that and do livestock feed. But over the years, we've had challenges in terms of research. Sometimes you would start a business and struggle with finding research institutions that you can maybe test the innovations that you've developed as a business. So we've ended up having to find alternative ways of finding companies that maybe produce similar products or produce similar additives outside the country and partner with them. Because in our country, research in terms of the livestock space, it's not that big. And also, the major challenge we face is access to finance. I can tell you this year only we've submitted our proposal for funding 4 times. And I had to take a break because it was depleting us because we were bleeding dry. Just to put in the whole application costs a lot of money. And sometimes when you don't have the money to hire a consultant who can make the proposal top notch, you end up not having to be approved. You keep on going back and forth. And a consultant is more like 10,000 kilo, which is probably not sure in dollars how it would be. So for us, it's a lot of money. So we've had to pause on seeking for funding to just get the business to be afloat, and maybe we've tried to access funding, but the major thing of our rejection is collateral. The financiers would seek certain amount of collateral that we don't have. Either it's land, or you have to have land that you can put in as collateral, or you have to have assets that you can put in as collateral. For Botswana, land is quite big. Having land as an asset, it makes it easy for you to be bankable or for you to be financed. So we don't have that amount of land or that amount of collateral. So it makes it hard for us to get the funding that we want. I think that has been the major challenge. But either way, As a business, I think I'm a very resilient person. Whether I get it, I'll find a way to navigate the system and, find ways, maybe implement more services that we can help generate revenue so that we can be able to produce what we want to produce or find innovative ways. We are currently looking at assisting farmers in the nutritional aspect, helping them make sure that whatever feed they're producing, whatever they're producing is of the right standard, of the right nutritional quantity, and we help them manage their farms. So if we are not able to produce foods, we find other ways to actually supplement whatever we do as a business. And in terms of policy, I think this comes at the right time. I'm currently at the African Union and we're designing policies for youth and agribusiness. We really need policy that speaks to funding for small businesses or for small enterprises that don't have collateral or startups. Sometimes, like, I can give you a good track record of how we've been operating. Like the track record of us speaks to that, but because we don't have like a certain amount of money or asset, shouldn't eliminate us from accessing finance. So we really need policy that can speak to that and maybe support us in that area to say if a person has developed a business and she has made it to this far, but this is the amount they can be given to be actually funded as a business. So I think those are the type of policies and also support structure in terms of research. What funds can maybe government or private stakeholders put in terms of research, especially in the agricultural space? We really need to explore more research in terms of the food we can produce or process, either for human consumption or for livestock consumption, and other processes or other products and commodities that we can develop in the agri space. We are lacking behind in terms of research and development, especially within Africa. So I think for me, those are the policies that I think could be implemented.
Thank you so much for those very concrete, very clear examples. I really took away that you said even a request for funding costs money, right? This is, I think, very important for us to keep in mind. And this aspect of collateral that you talked about, most small businesses don't have much collateral and maybe not land, for example, which would be the preferred collateral. And so there should be other models available, and then also support structures in terms of research so that more innovative ideas can actually get into the market. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I think that's fantastic. And I wish you, of course, all the success at the African Union as well, pushing those ideas forward. And maybe you'll take some new ones away from this webinar as well. I'm going to hand the floor now to Mr. Hans, who is working with ASELI Africa and also USAID. So Nia was talking about her struggles getting a loan. Growing her business has been a challenge, even though she's keeping in it. She's, being persistent as a young person. What does ASELI do to support micro entrepreneurs like her? And what advice would you give in terms of the next business move? And then secondly, in terms of support to agri enterprises, what circumstances have you seen give the biggest impact, both in terms of return on investment and wage job creation for other youth? What criteria do you look for in order to provide a loan, and what kind of loan in terms of phase of business maturity? The floor is yours for the next 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Gina. First of all, just to correct, I don't work for ASELI, so I work for USAID.
Excuse me.
And I manage the ASELI program. So yeah, the ASELI program is one of our USAID activities. So I work with USAID as on the agriculture finance team, been with the agency for over 4 years now. And my work is primarily supporting the agency mobilize private finance for agriculture. So yeah, thank you very much to the previous speakers and to Loto. I hope I'm pronouncing it correct. Yeah, what Loto talks about access to finance is not just unique to her. A lot of agri SMEs we have seen in Africa, especially in Africa, face challenges in accessing finance. And yet we know youth-owned businesses or youth who are not inclined to working on the farm and are engaged in what we'll call off-farm enterprises without access to land or production resources. are a key, pathway to, economic transformation in Africa. So many of them we have seen, working in SMEs like Lotto, and in Africa, agriculture SMEs have the potential to create pathways. However, the potential remains unrealized due to that estimated, it's 65 billion annual financing gap, and this translates to roughly about 3 in 4 agri SMEs lacking finance they need to grow. What explains this financing gap? Simply put, the economics of serving agriculture SMEs are not attractive to lenders. These businesses are located in remote areas, have few assets to offer as loan collateral, possess limited management capacity to navigate volatile markets and the changing climate. So we've seen this, across Africa, and it is based on that USAID came up with the ASELI Africa team to design an activity to incentivize or encourage lending to these enterprises, youth-owned enterprises, women-owned enterprises, which are normally startups or many times have no track record. But how have we managed to work with especially financial institutions, lenders, commercial banks, and sometimes social lenders and non-banking financial institutions? The ASELI Africa activity, and I'll share the link in the chat, is a market incentive facility that was designed to address both the supply and the demand side. So the demand side, looking at the agri SMEs, then the supply side, the financial institutions. Often the financial institutions are constrained in lending to early stage enterprises or to female and youth-owned borrowers due to lack of knowledge and capacity of the financial institutions and the high real and perceived risks and high transaction costs for lending in agriculture. Like I said earlier, lending to agriculture is very costly, and these are commercial banks that are looking for returns. So unless we incentivize them or using data and evidence, which ASELI does, so as the ASELI Africa activity is increasing lending to agriculture through what we call targeted incentives. Targeted incentives are 2 forms. One, addressing the risk side, and that's through what we call catalytic capital, providing guarantees and fast loans to financial institutions to enable them to lend to these so-called risk enterprises, women-owned, youth-owned, first-time borrowers, as well as origination costs. When we talk of origination incentive, that means because most times you'll find many of these businesses are looking for the smaller ticket sizes, $15,000 to $200,000. Many commercial banks are looking for the higher ticket sizes. Why? Because it takes the same effort to lend to originate a loan of 15,000 or 100,000. They would rather go for 100,000. So how do we incentivize them for those lower ticket sizes? Is giving them what we call an origination incentive. And this ASELI Africa activities in 5 countries now: Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Zambia. Hopefully it will come to Botswana, and Lesotho will also benefit. But so these incentives, we've realized the financial institutions, if you're giving them, addressing the issue of risk and addressing the issue of transaction cost, then they'll be willing to lend to these enterprises. And when you generate that data and learning, you'll be able to influence governments in these countries to provide more funding into the agriculture sector to support the agriculture sector. And I'll give you, an example that we've seen happen. Very important for us to notice, these youth are usually the early adopters. They are the best innovators. They are the risk takers. I was telling somebody else the other day, I wish I was a youth now, because they are very, innovative, and they're willing to take on risk. And we've realized big uptake of this incentive by financial institutions to lend to these youth and women-owned enterprises. And ASELI Africa, aims to increase lending to SMEs by strengthening the enabling environment, generating data and learning to influence policy and budget reforms. In addition to these incentives, we've got what we call an impact bonus, which is climate for impact areas. So we are looking at impact-linked financing. So climate, youth, food security and nutrition, and gender. Hearing Iloto talk, she covers almost all 4 areas. So the financial institutions getting that impact bonus to lend to an agri-SME that Iloto was talking about would achieve the incentives for those impact areas. And through generating that evidence, we're seeing more and more financial institutions lending to these enterprises that they thought were risky. But through the some of this data, I'll just give an example and stop there. In the Tanzania government, which was really before it was response to the COVID, the highlight, established the Tanzania 1 trillion fund to be channeled through commercial banks, financial institutions for agricultural lending. Banks accessing these funds pay an annual interest rate of 3% in Tanzanian shillings and are required to lend to the market at risk of no more than 10% Tanzanian shillings. Participating banks under CELI, we have seen the interest rate, which was at 20.6% in 2019, be reduced to now 10%. So you can just see some of the policies that have been taken by governments, including, for now for Tanzania, but also the other countries are now looking at having these specialized funds for commercial banks to lend to these enterprises. So I think that is very key. If we can generate data and learning and influence policy decisions by governments, we'll see more lending in that space, but also with those targeted financial institutions, making sure we're not distorting the market. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing about that approach. I think that's a really concrete way of addressing the challenge of this small loans, right? I think this is something that also small NGOs face, right? That the grant sizes are just as administratively intense to loan or to make as a bigger grant, right? And so this is a similar thing that you're talking about. And I think that the approach that you all have used is something that we can really learn from. So definitely looking forward to also seeing the associated knowledge products that are coming out of your project as well. Our last panelist is Ms. Dr. Pilar, who is working with FAO as a nutrition and food systems officer. And we'd really love for you to be able to pull this session together, right, with your expertise from FAO. We want to ask you how microenterprises can be leveraged to achieve social impact. How can we really improve the business environment for agripreneurs and microenterprises? And what can governments do in terms of policies? And how is FAO working to support that?
Thank you so much for the invitation and the previous speakers, because they definitely paved the way for my talk today. Effectively, the case for the small and medium enterprise is a case beyond even the youth employment. The MSMEs in the low and medium income countries are responsible for at least 1/4 of the all employment and 1/3 of the total woman employment. So it's a huge contribution from them. But then also in doing so they fulfill a very crucial function of connecting distant producers with consumers and responding to increased demand for diverse and processed foods. In the Sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, the MSMEs are the channel for 95% of all products and generating income to small-scale producers. And on the consumer side, they are providing 80% of the total food consumption. So they have an aggregated power to determine the range of food this is available and affordable to consumers and to shape the diet and nutrition, but also in enhancing the local economies in rural areas. Women are very important actors engaged in SMEs and both as workers and entrepreneurs. So there is a potential drive for female empowerment with positive repercussions on nutrition, education, and other development elements. Unfortunately, most of this employment in the MSMEs is informal, and especially for youth and women, the rates of informality are very high, They reach over 75% according to our data in low middle income countries. So, and this implies very poor labor conditions and also poor incomes if they are entrepreneurs and they participate in the more fragmented value chains, in the small businesses, and in the worst conditions. So those elements shape the kind of policies, the kind of intervention that are needed, which I will summarize in 4 main elements, which consider, according to our work over more than 10 years with NSMEs, for nutrition, for youth employment, and for women inclusiveness. The first one is how to reduce value chain fragmentation and support ecosystems, business environments. The need to improve connectivity or networking among the value chain actors. That is through an appropriate offer of an access to technologies and technical and business services. And this is would be in partnership with local, or should be in partnership with local institutions. Also, it's important to make investments in physical infrastructure, as part of the connectivity, mainly for more marketplaces, and offering also in those places services like water and power to help in the aggregation, processing, and preservation of food in the marketplaces. Digital infrastructure is very important to improve information and transparency in the markets, and in terms of the horizontal linkages, aggregation, formation of clusters, or SMEs associations are very crucial. All of these elements are important to incentivize MSMEs investing in their improving their business models. The second critical entry point in our view is considering nutrition as a business case. All or most of these SMEs, as I say, they're providing the food to consumers in small and large cities. And then there is a great opportunity. They participate fully in improving health and nutrition in the countries. But for this to happen, we need that nutrition and the diversification objectives are integrated in agricultural policies, so that there can be a balanced and diversified diet in the markets. Another element of this in this entry point is to support public procurement authorities to create a demand for nutritious and balanced food that is produced under environmental sound conditions, promoting education at different levels, including training and mentoring for SMEs and nutrition-sensitive food supply. The third element I wanted to highlight is very much related to the second one, and is the need to make food safety and quality affordable to MSMEs. Food safety and quality need to strike a balance between safeguarding health and also without imposing excessive burden on SMEs. These food safety requirements tend to be too cumbersome and expensive for MSMEs, and it's the first element in the formalization of any MSME. So excessive regulatory pressure is ineffective in low and middle income countries, because they don't have the capacity to monitor, and also what they increase the consequences to increase informality and increase the food safety risk for consumers. The other element, and in that regard, there is a need to support the public authorities in the regulatory world and help develop frameworks, standards, and food control systems that protect consumers while without creating increasing business costs. And the fourth one is the more general business and regulatory environment. is a prerequisite for MSME investment toward upgrade the business models that can create effectively formal employment. So according to the World Bank, ease of doing business, it takes nearly 6 times as long to start a business in a low and middle income country than in high income country. So taxation, regulatory and financial system impose a comparatively higher burden on SMEs than on the larger counterparts. So the need to redress such discriminatory features and improving the quality of these systems as a prerequisite to enable SMEs to invest towards improving diet and sustainable agri-food transformations. So that governments, financial institutions should work together to bridge this financial gap faced by SMEs and how to facilitate formalization and improve the financial readiness, but also generate particular financial instruments that are specifically adapted to the needs of the SMEs, with a special focus and target on women and youth entrepreneurs. So in very short, we need a comprehensive multi-sectoral strategy for supporting MSMEs to create youth and women employment and better contribute to other goals such nutrition, local development, and women inclusive needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very strong framework, those very clear 4 interventions that governments can follow, and that, of course, we as practitioners in the field can also support as well to make those a reality, either if that's through our programs or our policy advocacy. I think those are really strong tools for us to take from your intervention. And of course, we'll look, of course, to the written products that your division has as well to help us on that journey. So thank you so much, Dr. Pilar, for those interventions, and to the entire panel for telling us more about successful strategies that you've all been able to see to support SMEs despite the many, many hurdles that there are to them in growing and developing. This brings us to our almost final part of our webinar, which is the question and answer portion. And I've seen several questions and answers in the chat, so I would really heartily invite the audience to please raise your hand using the raise hand function to ask your question to one of the panelists. And I please request that you make your question brief, direct, so that we can get 2 questions in from the audience. And if not, then I can read out the questions from the chat as well.
Gina, I've seen a question for myself. I can answer if you want.
Yes, very gladly. Please take the question. And if you can also summarize the question, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, the question is about women employment, because I mentioned, that in our about 1,000 enterprises that we followed, we got about 80% which are managed by women. And that's the reality of what we have seen. Is we do follow we have complete data, of all enterprises from the day we start with them up to 4 years later, for example, in this case, and that's the data we get. So it is 80%. Now, and then within these enterprises, I mentioned also the number of employees which are trained on technology or what else, and it was about the same. It was 80% also. So it means that it's mainly women who are in our case, which is a transformation of agricultural products. It's mainly managed by and employed by women and young women. So I don't know if then I've seen the same kind of statistics. I saw your number was a bit below that, around 53, if I'm correct. But that's what we have seen in the 4 countries, Mali, Burkina, Chad, and Senegal.
Thank you so much. I think that's really interesting. I want to hand the floor also to Sven, who has raised his hand. I don't know if this is on this topic or a separate one, so go ahead.
Actually, the hand is about taking the question from
in the enterprises.
On the skills trainings.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So we mainly worked with short course skills trainings, accessible, affordable, and means of where do you need to go for these training courses, and then aligned to what we saw with the value chain and business model analysis, and bringing together different aspects. So it's not only skills, technical skills, but also entrepreneurial skills, which includes the financial literacy, digital literacy, all that needs to come together. Nevertheless, we also looked at the curricula for these short term, but also for longer term trainings. And in some countries, I know that these curricula have been adopted. Yeah, over.
Perfect. Thank you. Pilar, I see that your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to reaffirm what Jean-Marc had said in her presentation. We have run profiling of MSMEs in over 18 countries, and what you presented is exactly what we found in this profiling. I mean, the women are the main owners in the micro and small enterprises. They predominate almost always in those which are the most informal and sometimes are the less attended, with less access to any kind of service technologies, etc. And they are mainly dealing also with kind of agri-foods activities, no, mostly production, aggregation, processing, and some kind of retailing. So that is the reality in the field of these MSMEs led by women.
Thank you so much for that affirmation. I think that's really interesting that you were able to see also on the macro level a trend really that Jean-Marc was describing. I think we have the last question in the chat, which goes to Mr. Hans. If you would like, you can take the question, and that'll be our last question for our questions round.
Sure, thank you very much. You know, I see the question is Hans, using intermediaries, banks to deliver loans to new entrepreneurs. How do you guarantee that banks prioritize disbursement to entrepreneurs and do not lend to commercial enterprises at a higher rate? So, just to be clear, we do not give funds to be lent out. We work with these financial institutions who have got their balance sheet, who have got their funds lending. So we give them an incentive to lend from their money, lend to agri-enterprises that they would not have lent to due to the higher risk. So they have the liquidity, but we just are giving them an incentive, what we call an origination incentive. Origination incentive would maybe cover origination costs of a loan that they wouldn't have made without our involvement. So that's the additionality. We are coming in saying, Bank X, if you're going to lend to Gina who wants a loan of $20,000, we are going to pay for the origination cost for you to be able to lend to her. So, and again, so we don't change the market rate, for example, the interest rates, but because the banks realize we're de-risking them and we're paying for the transaction costs, they're able to lower interest rates for some of these loans. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much for the questions and the really lively discussion in the question and answer session. I know I learned a lot from the webinar today. And to wrap it up for us today, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Ji Yoon, who is working with the OECD and the RYE co-chair to conclude and also to announce, of course, the next webinars and different activities that you can look forward to.
Yes, thank you, Jenna, and thank you so much for to all the speakers. I mean, it was such a rich webinar, a lot of information. Obviously, I'm not going to try to summarize what was said, but we see that there's no silver bullet to rural youth or youth employment in agri-food. We need to have a mix of skills development, coaching, financing, business environment. All of this has to come together. It's no small task, but it's great to see all the actors here together working on different pieces of the puzzle. I just want to say that this is hosted by the Thematic Working Group of the Global Donor Platform on Rural Development. And we organize twice a year webinars and quarterly meetings. If any of you are interested or working in rural youth employment and practitioner as experts, as a donor, etc., it's a very informal group. You please just write to the organizer, Sierra, at the Global Donor Platform, and we will include you in our meetings. The conversation continues because we'll be focusing on financing agri-food entrepreneurs in November 26th during the Global Donor Platform on Rural Development's annual General Assembly, which will focus on financing food system transformation. So I invite you to keep an eye on this invitation. Join us, on site or by virtual. And we look forward to continuing this conversation in a little less than a month. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.